Zika alert. A leading professor of parasite immunology tells me of his fears that Zika could spread to Mediterranean countries, until now unaffected by the virus. And the future of science in space. Does the International Space Station have a future? In the perennial fight for funding, could mankind's only home in space be allowed to close? I'm Martin Stanford. This is Insight. Welcome to Insight. The Zika virus started life in Africa and causes an illness that's not fatal, but has been linked to birth defects if contracted by pregnant women or women who are planning a pregnancy. Its prominence peaked earlier this year when a new outbreak was detected in Brazil and threatened the attendances and the smooth running of the Rio Olympics. Strangely, in this high-tech age, there are no drugs and vaccines available. So the world's leading scientists are focusing on attacking the virus's carrier, the mosquito. And this is it. This is not any old mosquito. Zika is only carried by the Aedes aegypti mosquito, which is found in particular parts of the world under particular conditions. Or so we thought. But now experts at London's Gresham College have raised the possibility that the Zika virus might eventually be carried by more common mosquitoes, including those found much further north, so putting Mediterranean countries in the Middle East and Europe potentially at risk. And they warn that climate change could, over time, exacerbate the problem still further. One tropical disease expert warning of such problems is Professor Francis Cox. I met him in the mosquito-free environment of a London park to find out more. The monitoring of Zika outbreaks is fairly efficient and fairly effective around the world these days. Tell me why that is.
Well, it's not just Zika. It's there's a network throughout the world, largely organised by the World Health Organization, to look for the potential for diseases to arise or emerge. Largely emerging diseases has become a big business these days because so many have arisen recently in places. And so all countries now are aware that there are going to be diseases coming, new mosquitoes coming in. It's not just this, it's alien animals, alien plants. It's just part of the whole system of trying to make sure that each of our countries is safe from diseases coming from elsewhere.
Do we know exactly why something like Zika can suddenly have an increase in incidence and then die down again for a period of time?
Yes, what happens is the disease spreads very quickly. People become infected, they recover, they're then immune, and after that they're not infected again. And then eventually either the immunity dies down or new people come in. We call that herd immunity, where most of the population are immune. And then eventually that is going to fade, and then you're going to have another outbreak.
And is it purely random, or is there quite a science as to when you might expect another outbreak to happen?
No, we're very good at predicting these things now, very good indeed. We have the tools and we have the people, the mathematicians and the epidemiologists who can make these predictions. They sometimes get it wrong, but most times it's right.
There could be another narrative to that story, that the usual way we rely on just one mosquito to carry the Zika or other viruses like that from person to person might be broken down. Just describe the bad scenario one.
Bad scenario one is that Zika is at the moment transmitted by a mosquito called Aedes aegypti, and it's a very good vector. It's one of the best vectors in the world. Now, Aedes aegypti has a number of problems. It has some geographical limitation. For example, it can't survive below about 23 degrees centigrade, so it's rather limited in its distribution. Now, there's also another mosquito called Aedes albopictus, and that is much more widely spread. It can survive down to about 17 degrees or even lower than that. Now, we know that Zika can be transmitted by Aedes albopictus, at least experimentally. So we do know it is theoretically possible at any rate that the Zika virus could just switch over from the Aedes aegypti, the common vector, to a new vector, Aedes albopictus.
Which would bring in a whole new set of populations and countries and territories into the mosquito equation.
Absolutely. Taking Europe as an example, it was spread right across the south of Europe, Almost the whole of Italy, certainly Greece, Turkey, much of Spain, probably south of France, a large area there. And of course in America even worse, because already it's up in Florida.
This is a theoretical extrapolation of a set of circumstances. How close to reality do you think it might be?
I think it is very close to reality. It is, you say, an extrapolation, it's a model, but I think it could happen.
And the other thing that might happen is climate change might change the territories in which these insects can survive.
Yes, absolutely. At the moment, Aedes aegypti, as I said, is very unhappy at temperatures under 25. But of course, as climate change occurs, very slowly, at the moment it's about 0.25 of a degree every 100 years. It's not very much, but over time, we're eventually going to move the area which is possible for the virus to survive, Aedes aegypti to survive. And already there's been a lot of work done by modellers at the School of Tropical Medicine who've already listed a whole series of countries where the disease could occur. So we do know where it could occur. Bangladesh, for example, large areas of Asia, for example, and of course, I say Southern Europe.
And all the mosquito needs to reproduce is a warm, damp or wet area, correct?
Absolutely, warm or damp or wet, yes.
And the most common place, or one of the most common places it's found, is discarded tyres.
Yes, that's an amazing discovery. The Aedes mosquito doesn't like fresh water or ponds or pools or streams that most other mosquitoes do. It likes temporary water. And it's very fond of puddles. It can breed in places, for example, like coconut shells, eggshells, gutters, even old bottle tops, or anything damp. But the most important thing about it is that we know for some time that used tyres, that's the main way in which this mosquito can be spread throughout the world.
Is through these used tyres,
Yeah.
which, let's face it, even away from the tropics, in Western European countries, we all know part of a city where there's a load of old tyres lying around.
There are old tyres everywhere.
Yeah.
An amazing number of old tyres. Japan, for example, exports tyres to 130 different countries. And I don't really know what happens to these tyres. I think they just lie around in heaps, collecting more and more water.
So although it's a little off topic, I can see you could join the dots to actually make an appeal to world authorities. This tyre waste problem, someone's got to come up with a better idea than just leaving them lying around, or worse, exporting them to countries in the African continent and leaving them lying around there.
No, absolutely. Something's got to be done about this used tyre problem. I think there are some people who've just begun to notice this, but on a global scale, there doesn't seem to be any economic advantage of trying to do anything with used tyres except dump them.
So the intervention we need about tyres, we understand. What do you think the intervention should be to guard against these doomsday scenarios you've painted for us?
The easiest way and the best way to control this mosquito, which also transmits dengue, which is very important, and it occurs in Singapore and Malaysia, two of the richest countries in the world. And community clearing seems to be the most effective way of keeping the mosquito down. A certain amount of fogging with insecticides and education. It's very simple techniques can be used. Screening houses, covering up puddles, draining streams, all that kind of thing work very well. But in the future, there's just the possibility we might be able to use genetically modified mosquitoes for this. And the current theory is to use what are called sterile male mosquitoes. The female only mates once in her life. And the idea is actually to put out a lot of sterile male mosquitoes. So of course there are no fertile offspring from that. And this has been done for a number of crop diseases, and it's been very, very effective for insects. They've got rid of a number of insects for crop diseases, a lot of these.
But it is a proven technology. It can be done.
It is a proven technology and very effective in about a dozen or so crop diseases. Important crop diseases have been very, very effective indeed. Yeah.
Would it scale up? Would it apply to the mosquito, and particularly the Zika one?
I don't think it will apply to the mosquito. It's been successfully done on small trials and isolated islands, for example, or isolated parts in the world. But the big problem really is how on earth do you swamp the natural population with these sterile mosquitoes? And the other important thing is that in order to survive, a mosquito has to have some sort of adaptive advantage. And if it's not passing on its genes,
Yes.
you have to keep on putting in this new selective advantage.
Would you ever conceive of a scenario whereby the world has got rid of the mosquito? They've rendered it extinct by some human intervention?
No, I don't think we'll ever do that. And also, from an ecological viewpoint, I think it would be very dangerous to eliminate any species at all without actually knowing what the consequences are going to be.
There could be the law of unintended consequences.
There will
could kick
be
in.
the law of unintentional consequences, as happened in many other places where they've had good intentions but disastrous outcomes.
We just need smarter about dealing with the mosquitoes we have.
Yes, and I think we are getting smarter. The insecticides that we have at the moment are very expensive, very difficult to use. We can find better ones, I think. If you take malaria, for example, the use of insecticide-impregnated bed nets has been incredibly successful.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work with the Aedes because Aedes bites out of doors.
Yes.
So bed nets are pretty useless there. But someone is going to come up with some way of dealing with them. We've got a bit of time, not much time, but we have a bit of time.
I detect that although, in a sense, you're devoting some of your work to battling the nasty side of the mosquito, you're quite fond of them, aren't you?
Not only am I fond of them, they're also very fond of me. And I've spent many a happy hour with a coffee cup in one hand and my other arm in a cage of mosquitoes. I am very attractive to mosquitoes.
Really?
Yes.
Why do you do that?
Someone's got to do it.
Somebody's got to do the experiments.
Yes.
And you're the volunteer.
Well, I'm one of the volunteers, one of the many volunteers, yes. I don't react badly to Aedes bite, which is a good thing. I do react very badly to our local mosquito, Culex, in this country. I react very badly to them, but fortunately not to Aedes.
Right. Do you need more volunteers? Is this something somebody can help you with?
No, not really. There are plenty of postgraduate students.
That's what you put your postgrads through. Put your arm in a mosquito tent.
Well, there are master students and postgraduate students only too keen to do something which is harmless and very useful.
This is Insight. Coming up, we explore what's next for the International Space Station.